October 2025, and so that means it's time once again to dive into a topic that coincides with horror. And this year we're actually revisiting a movie that we took a look at a few Octobers back, for the same reason. That's right, we're going back to Raccoon City to cover the uniforms of S.T.A.R.S, or the Special Tactics and Rescue Service as depicted in the 2004 movie Resident Evil Apocalypse. Now, Resident Evil in general needs no introduction, and on top of that, we've pretty much laid out the story of this entry in the previous video, which you can take a look at if you feel so inclined. But more or less, Resident Evil Apocalypse was the second entry in the 6-movie franchise, which went from 2002 until 2017. In it, essentially the T-Virus broke out of the Umbrella Corp's facility and spread throughout Raccoon City, with Umbrella and the city police trying to contain it and evacuate the populace, all while a number of characters try to survive and escape safely. Throughout, there were a number of units from both the Raccoon City PD as well as Umbrella Corp, with perhaps the most famous being the rather simply dressed yet memorable S.T.A.R.S units. When it's broken down, their uniform is pretty straightforward, as it's just a pair of BDU-style trousers, a white t-shirt, an undervest, and a tactical vest, along with a pistol belt and holster. But the distinctive look has a little bit of a backstory, while some of the pieces are a bit more unique than they lead on. But before initiating the breakdown of this look, we're going to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this video, Venture Surplus. Though they may not carry all the standard issue gear for Umbrella or the RPD, they do carry quite an assortment of United States military surplus as well as related gear. Be it tried and true pieces like assorted BDUs of all camouflages and colors, various vests, panels, and chest rigs, to helmet parts and pieces. So if you're looking for specific US or similar gear, be it for collecting, outdoor, and tactical use, casual wear, or even putting together a specific kit, be sure to take a look at their ever-increasing inventory. And while there, be sure to use the coupon code HISTORY10 at checkout to get 10% off your order. As always, thank you guys, and now let's venture back to talking about S.T.A.R.S. Now, we're breaking down this specific iteration of S.T.A.R.S as it's actually the only proper unified uniform throughout the entire franchise, as in the original games and their subsequent remakes, remasters, and spin-offs, each member of the unit has their own look. In this very recognizable photo that shows almost every operator, you can see a level of uniformity, but when viewing their vests, weapons, and accessories, they all vary to some extent. Throw in gameplay and cutscenes, and they are all pretty different, as canon-wise, the unit was a relatively new one, only to be disbanded by Umbrella after they began investigating them, meaning time hadn't quite been put into getting properly made uniforms yet. But for this movie, they more or less made them a more established, prevalent, and large unit, while also lifting the look of one specific member from the games, Chris Redfield, who didn't appear in the film franchise until the 4th entry, Resident Evil Afterlife. So in a way, this could also be a guide to his look, sort of. But anyway, let's actually start the breakdown. We'll begin with their gloves, as they were made by the same company as the ones worn by most Umbrella Corp units. Being black, fingerless, and padded, they had very distinct shapes on them, but also luckily the logo for Hatch. All of this together marked them as the Hatch LR10 Reactor fingerless gloves. Considering these aren't made anymore, your best course is to try and find secondhand or dead stock ones. However, very similar gloves have also been seen more recently, such as the M-Tac Fingerless Gloves Assault Tactical Mark I. Seen above these on a few members, most notably Sergeant Peyton Wells, was an item that was worn by certain Umbrella members, a watch which appeared to be the Suunto Vector with the Compass Bezel. Keeping with peripherals were the knee and elbow pads. As with the previous things, these were also worn by Umbrella counterparts, specifically the Centurion Guards, meaning they were the Hatch KP250 Centurion knee and elbow pads in the olive color. As with the gloves, these are a bit older and not as common, though they can still be sourced somewhat easily, though due to their very common design, more generic lookalikes can certainly be substituted if need be. Getting to the primary components now was the vest, which was actually two separate pieces, a tactical outer bearing assorted pouches and strapping, and an inner, which was likely intended to be more of a protective one for debris, shrapnel, or bullets. The undervest was the only custom-made piece for the uniform, but was almost assuredly inspired by the ones worn by S.T.A.R.S members in the games, granted in various colors, which were inspired by an older flak jacket. Though not seen being worn on its own during the film, from the glimpses of its details as well as the few images of costume pieces from auctions, it featured a stand-up collar, a button front flap, and broader shoulders, with the closest real-world equivalent being the US Vietnam-era armor body fragmentation protective with 1/4 collar, also known as the US M69 flak vest. Originals of these are pretty expensive and heavy, so sourcing an official one probably isn't the best bet. However, quite a few replicas, tutorials, and templates have been seen over the years. Capcom at one point even made licensed replicas. On a quick side note, this vest also made another appearance in the 2021 movie Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, granted without its collar, with it being worn by Chris Redfield no less. The outer, or tactical vest, was a bit more intricate, seeing on its front 4 large assault rifle magazine pouches, 3 pistol magazine pouches, a single general-purpose pouch with hook and loop for a patch, and a smaller pouch, likely for a first aid kit, while on the back there was a radio pouch, as well as a larger central pouch insert for assorted items, but specifically a hydration bladder. Finally, along its lower portion were a series of hook and loop bands to connect a pistol belt. This particular vest was the Blackhawk Urban Assault Vest 33UA00OD. The OD standing for olive drab. Like many older Blackhawk models, these have become highly sought after, leading to prices going up while inventory goes down. If you keep your eye out though, sometimes they can appear on sites like eBay. Alternatively, Blackhawk and Eagle Industries, as well as various other companies, continue to produce assault vests like this, granted with different pouches and feature orientations, as well as materials such as mesh rather than solid fabric. Now, those hook and loop bands just mentioned were actually used, as on all vests an olive US military pistol belt was seen, specifically ones with the black side release buckle. Attached to it was a drop leg holster, sort of. It was actually another US surplus piece, the hip holster M12, though also known as the Bianchi M12 or UM84 holster. These were used by the US military for the Beretta 92 FS as well as 1911s, but apparently could fit a few other pistols too. The thing about these is that they were often worn straight on the hip or even on vests and other gear, but if one wanted to use it in a drop leg orientation, there were 2 other pieces that would be needed for it, both of which are seen in the movie: the extender hip and pouch magazine special. The holster and pouch would simply be attached to the extender, which would then connect to the belt at the top and secured by a strap around the thigh. These holsters are still relatively easy to find, however the extender is a little tricky, but the toughest is without a doubt the pouch, but again, they're out there. While on the topic of firearms, let's knock those out real quick, as there were quite a few and seemingly random to some extent, likely as a way to maximize usage for the production. Sidearms wise, their go-to was the Beretta 92 FS. Moving up from there was the HK UMP9 and HK MP5A3 submachine guns, Colt M4A1, Micro Galil, the SIG SG552, and HK G36C assault rifles, the M60 machine gun, and finally the Accuracy International Arctic Warfare sniper rifle. Getting now to the core components of the uniform were actually 2 very simple items: a white t-shirt and a tan khaki pair of pants. Rather than wearing a jacket or coat under the vest, the go-to was just a basic white t-shirt. However, considering it was the core component, the material appears to be a bit more durable, as it seemed to be a thicker material, allowing for a bit more protection and resistance against wear and tear. Seeing as these had no discernible markings or features and were really only seen under the vest, a basic white heavyweight cotton t-shirt does the trick just fine. Attached to them on the wearer's right sleeve was the S.T.A.R.S insignia patch, which was very similar to the original one as seen in the games, granted with a few slight changes. The overall shape and design of it was mostly the same, however the biggest differences were the font being slightly narrower, more detail on the inner portions of the 3 stars at their center, and most noticeably the outer Raccoon City Police Department showing DEPT rather than just DEP, along with a 3rd dot between DEPT and Raccoon, which is absent in the games version. Now, finding S.T.A.R.S patches is very easy, however the movie's iteration isn't, as it's not as widespread considering it's only seen in the one movie versus the various games along with their remakes and or remasters. However, some of these are a bit closer than others, so it's just a matter of scrutinizing the available ones. Moving down a bit are the trousers, which upon initial inspection look to be just a pair of tan-colored battle dress uniform or BDU pants, as they see 2 inset waist pockets, 2 rear pockets, and 2 square thigh cargo ones. However, looking at some more nuanced details like the stitch work and seams, as well as extra ones like those near the top of the cargo pockets, these appear to have been a specific company's model of tactical or combat trousers heavily inspired by the BDU. The only glimpse of something remotely close to a logo or symbol is on the lower portion of the wearer's right side cargo pocket, but being as it was only seen from afar, it can't quite be made out. Additionally, due to the only publicly available photos of these on display being taken shortly after the movie's release during a 2004 auction, they too are a bit grainy and don't reveal much, so what brand and model it is remains something of a mystery. Those that have recreated these usually go the route of the standard BDU, as the differences are nominal and options as far as brands and fabric are abound. If it's revealed later on or someone does recognize the emblem from its very brief and tiny appearance, reach out and we'll be sure to add info into the description. As far as what kept these trousers up though, it was pretty simple, being a black nylon BDU belt. That leaves us with one final element, the boots. Like the Centurion Guard, finding an exact model is a bit tricky due to the lighting and angles obscuring features in most shots. However, when scrubbing through the movie, it appears that a few were used between exterior details and the few glimpses of outsoles. A S.T.A.R.S member in uniform with the most screen time is Peyton, who has a promotional photo of him used in advertisement and posters where more tactical type boots with mixed fabric are seen. However, because the image isn't sharp, only certain features can be noted, but considering he's a primary character, he likely had specific boots worn only by him. As for the rest of S.T.A.R.S, the only instance of an outsole that can be identified features the top half, which is enough to confirm it as the Vibram 134 technical lug. Being something of a lesser used outsole, it has appeared on two somewhat common boots over the years, granted one in a less encountered variation. The first and cheapest is the US military ICWB, or Intermediate Cold Wet Boots, which are more frequently seen with the Vibram 148 Kletter lift outsole, but considering it first began being made and issued in the early 1990s, with a number of contracts, manufacturers, and updates seen with them over the years, it makes sense there would be slight differences. However, the most likely candidate for these, which are still made, are Corcoran's 10-inch leather field boots model 1525, which for the most part seem to have only used a technical lug during its production lifespan. In both cases, these appear to be made mostly of leather with a more simple design, which appear to fit the overall look of the boots worn by the assorted S.T.A.R.S members. But again, it's hard to say with 100% certainty. Like the trousers though, if anyone knows for certain, reach out and an update will be put into the description. As far as hats go, there was no official headwear for these guys, with the only member wearing one being the sniper during the fight with Nemesis, so for the sake of covering all ground, let's break that one down quickly. The base was a tannish brown cowboy or western style hat done up in the cattleman style as denoted by the three creases going from front to back, with the sides of the brim being slightly folded upwards. Around it was a camouflage band, which actually was just a shortened US 6-color desert web belt with a black roller buckle, which can be glimpsed when he stands up. This held 3 rounds for his rifle, which more than likely were 7.62 by 5.1mm NATO. Finally, on the front was a small golden US Army infantry device pin, which depicts cross muskets. And with that, that'll do it for the S.T.A.R.S members as seen in the movie Resident Evil Apocalypse. Now, obviously, there are other iterations of S.T.A.R.S as mentioned at the start, be it the games or the more accurate and much smaller scale ones seen in Welcome to Raccoon City, as well as the UBCS operatives and by extension Carlos Oliveira, not to mention the plethora of other characters, units, and uniforms throughout the movies and games. 2 videos in and we're just only scratching the surface on the franchise, so don't worry, more are coming. Maybe we'll finish off this movie and move on to other entries or hop around a bit, only time will really tell. A thanks to Hardesty Creations on Instagram for research suggestions regarding the boots, as well as Venture Surplus for sponsoring this one. To those who celebrate Halloween, enjoy it, and to those who don't, why not just throw on this movie for the hell of it? But anyway, if you want to stay up to date on any future Resident Evil or just other uniforms of the screen entries, make sure to subscribe or just check back really soon for more videos right here on Uniform History.